Good morning and welcome to Jesus is the Key to Reentry. I am so happy as we know that April is Second Chance Month, and all month we have been bringing on guests, to talk about second chances. I'm a firm believer of second chances. First of all, because of my faith as a Christian, as a believer. We know that God is not just a God of second chances, but of many chances. And as a formerly incarcerated individuals and coming out, we're looking for a second chance because society has ruled us out and said, okay, you did your time. But then when we get out, it's hard to start over sometimes. So, as believers, I want to encourage you to help be a help give people second chances. And today I bring on a guest. And I tell you what, God has brought some marvelous people in my life. And here is one. I met him at the beginning of my freedom back into society. And I am so excited that he has even agreed to do this for us. And he's going to talk to you today about criminal justice reform. And a lot of you may not know exactly what the criminal justice reform does, but I'm gonna kind of read a little bit of his bio, and as he get in, we'll talk more. If you have any questions that you would like to ask him, please feel free to do so. I love his personality. Number one, I'm just gonna tell you that. Okay, but anyway, John is a national recognized criminal justice advocate with experience building, leading criminal justice and healthcare organizations and campaign. He worked with multiple presidential administrators, dozen of governors, and different officials. He's provided and also was a part of different types of organization, including Taking Action for Good, which we know that is Miss Alice, my good friend and sister. So he was head of that. Different nonprofit roles, profit roles as well. He's definitely a man that knows his stuff. He knows if you have any questions in regards of the criminal justice reform, this is the man that asks the questions too. So now I'm going to bring him in, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right, but John, pronounce it.
Kufos.
Kufa.
Kufos.
Okay, great. Welcome today. Welcome, and thank you so much for being a part of Jesus, the Key to Reentry.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all your impactful work across the country. It's a real honor to be with you tonight today.
Great. I'm so happy. So let's just start off. I'm gonna ask you this. Let's tell people who are you, what you do, and why you do it. Let's start off with that.
Sure. So I'm John Kufos. I am the director of advocacy, criminal justice advocacy, at Arnold Ventures. Arnold Ventures is a very very large criminal justice organization. Based in, well, there's three offices: Houston, DC, and New York. I'm in the DC office. So before that, I've done a number of things, right? I did work with governors, as you mentioned, around the country, built nonprofits, built reentry programs around the country. Had the pleasure of being on stage with President Obama when he visited one of our programs in New Jersey. And then was on stage with President Trump when we did second sharing. And I think that one of the things I'm probably best known for is second chance hiring, even though I do a lot of other things. But the idea about second chance hiring is, how do you develop candidates who can participate in the job market, right? And then if you do that, what are you talking about? Well, you're talking about reentry, right? That's really what you're talking about when you're talking about developing job ready candidates, and that brings you to a lot of different areas. So I'm from New Jersey originally, again, but although in DC now.
Okay, great. Now let's talk. You say about the far as the workforce, and my last guest that I had on, he had second chances in the workforce, which we know that is very challenging. For people who's incarcerated to come out and maybe even get that second chance in society because of that box, or have you ever committed a felony? Can you kind of talk to people um about that a little bit more in depth?
Sure. And remember, you have two broad problems here, right? The first is on the employer side, which is what you're talking about, the criminal record being an exclusionary event, right? But then on the other side, you're talking about the candidate side, right? So even if you had the best employer in the world, meaning the most inclusive employer, an employer said, I only want to hire people with criminal records, the next question, of course, is do the people with criminal records in the areas they want to recruit them have the skills necessary to perform the job well? And those are two very, very different questions, right? So I think that when I would do second chance, or when I do second chance hiring, and I've done this for very, very large corporations around the country and
Mhm.
small and mid-sized businesses, what my goal was always was to get the employer the best candidate no matter what. And if the
Mhm.
best candidate just so happened to have a criminal record, right, so be it. And I
Mhm.
think that's the way we need to look at the second chance hiring space. But you started with the business situation. Let's talk about that. So one of the problems with the bit with on the business side, I think it is there's a lack of understanding in the business community about their liability. So put aside, even, let's just assume for the sake of this discussion, you had again the best employer. The one says, "Listen, I want to hire everybody with a criminal record that I can, who meets the job requirements." And again, that's important too. Who meets the job requirements? Not hiring for the sake of hiring, because it's business. It's not a charity. So a lot of employers don't know, or it varies by state. What's the negligent hiring standpoint in this state, right? What happens if they hire someone with a criminal record and
Mhm.
that person has an episode of some sort or has a disagreement and an issue happens on the job? Do they have an enhanced level of liability? And I think that's one of the things that you see vary from state to state. Um, and I think that's something that needs to get a lot more business friendly. And if legislators around the country made the laws more business friendly, right? Like Colorado has a really good one
Okay.
where an employer won't be presumed liable if they hire a person with a criminal record. Florida actually has a really good one. As long as an employer does a background check and does not place the candidate in a job related to their background. So
Mhm.
think about someone who may have had an issue with children working near children, right? Or think
Right.
about someone who has an addiction issue working near pills, right?
Mhm.
So long as they don't do that, Florida has really good protections for businesses. So, anyways, that's a long way of saying I think that legislators can really come together for the business community to help fix some of those negligent hiring, both myth and reality. And I think the second part is streamlining business incentives. So we hear a lot about, tax credits and things like that when you hire certain challenged populations, people with criminal records. And by the way, for your listeners and viewers who don't know, I also went to prison in New Jersey. I'll get to that in a minute. I was an attorney first, went to prison, and then came out. Although I'm the rare attorney that went to prison and didn't steal from his clients or anything like that.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Right.
mine sadly was a drunk driving accident that with near fatal consequences. Thank God that person didn't die. Um, and then I tried to lie my way out of it until I cleared up. Addiction hits us all.
Right.
So, but the other thing, going back to the business community, is the business incentives need to be better in the sense that you have uh, a number of training dollars through the Department of Labor, your federal Department of Labor, that go to the states, and either businesses are not aren't aware of them, or the method to tap those dollars is too complex. So, because the tax credit, the work opportunity tax credit, I think is a really good start. Federal bonding is a really good start, but
Right.
those things are not going to make or break a business's bottom line.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you is about the federal bonding, because I'm a federal, and they say, well, okay, well, we're bonded. So for people who don't know what actually being federal bonded, and can you kind of explain a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. So bonding, just as a general principle, bonding is an insurance policy, right? So think about bail bonds, right? A bail bond is an insurance policy, although
Mhm.
it's a different type, obviously. So
Mhm.
federal bonding says that up to a certain threshold, and the number escapes me of the current threshold, up to a certain threshold, if an employee with a criminal record uh, commits a theft or some similar type of loss, so to speak, on the job, that the federal government will cover X amount of dollars of that in an insurance policy. Now, the
Mhm.
problem with that is that the number is just too small. I mean, think about the most basic, and put people with criminal records aside. Say anybody walks out of their employer today with a USB drive with a bunch of personal data of customers, right?
Mhm.
That lawsuit is going to be in the millions, right?
Mhm.
Or there may be a class action. So
Right.
federal bonding doesn't give people enough coverage, so to speak.
Okay.
But the thing is the idea is when you add all these things up, right, it starts to create a better business picture. So that's a long way of saying that I think we're doing well in the country, but we
Mhm.
have a lot farther to go. And I think that the better we design things for the business community, the better it's going to be for people with criminal records, because the only scalable solution in America is going to be the business case, right? Philanthropy is not a sustainable solution. In other words, we can't rely on organizations to just give money in perpetuity to fix a problem, right? What
Mhm.
we need to create opportunity, to maximize the opportunity for people, and by doing that, maximize the opportunity and the value proposition for businesses to do this. And then
Mhm.
you'll see a lot more businesses do it. And then, of course, it's incumbent upon all of us in the criminal justice space, particularly like when I worked at a reentry program, it was really important, Militia, to make sure that you're only sending the best candidates, especially to employers, because it only takes one bad candidate or one
Right.
bad experience, excuse me, to sour the whole pot.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's the truth. They say one apple, ruins a whole bunch. So that's
Yeah.
definitely the truth with that.
And it's
And
not fair. It's not fair. I want to just add one thing. All the research has shown that a person with a criminal record is a more loyal employee. They perform as well or better than their counterparts in the same job title. There's significantly less turnover, and I think it's obvious why, right? Because
Mhm.
people like us with criminal records are not used to job offers being, to a whole table full of job offers for us, right?
Right.
So we do the best we can, and we do the best for our employer that we can. And I think that it's really interesting when businesses learn about this research and data. And this isn't research and data that somebody made up somewhere. This is from the Society for Human Resources Management, the
Mhm.
largest human resources operation in America. It's the
Mhm.
largest trade group for human resources officers.
Right. Okay. Now let me ask you something here. Okay, at a personal level, what brought you into the field of criminal justice anyway? What brought you into criminal justice field?
Sure. So it's interesting. So I grew up with a dad in and out of prison, mom, very young teenage mom, issues, and very issues with a very rough dad. Now the interesting, my father, I don't know anybody that could have built a reentry program to help my father. I mean, and that's the reality. Look, I mean, no, but 100% of people are not going to do everything, right? And
That's
all
right.
of us who have been locked up know that
Right.
there's an overwhelming amount of folks who want a second chance, or maybe even a first chance, right? Or a third chance or fourth chance, as you mentioned in your opening, right?
Mhm.
But then there are some people, and this is how it is everywhere in the world, right? That if you give them a second chance on a silver platter, they're still not going to take it, right? And I think my father fit into that category, right?
Right.
Um, so anyway, so I grew up in this wild environment. My father escapes from federal custody at one point. We lived in under assumed names, different parts of the country. Very, very wild, like I said, wild upbringing. It could be its own show to do that one.
Mhm.
And so I grew up poor. So then I worked my way after high school. I was doing, odd jobs, the maintenance man and pump gas and things like that in New Jersey. And then I went to college, really at the being pushed by a friend's father, because I didn't really have any role models or anybody in my own life. Um, and so I went to college, and then I did, fairly well at college at John Jay College in New York. And from there, I got a half scholarship to Fordham Law School. So this was a real surprise to me because, just a few years prior, I was, pumping gas with hopeless job prospects. I didn't have a record yet, by the way. But, I wasn't really going anywhere in life.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, here I am at this law school. But the interesting thing was, you're running concurrent to all of this was I was a completely functional alcoholic. I started drinking at 15, and whenever I wasn't doing something critically important, I was drinking. So college, obviously, drinking, they look the other way. Law school, they definitely look the other way when you're drinking at law school. Then you become a lawyer, and then everybody drinks in the profession, right? So it's an easy place to be a functional alcoholic, candidly. And I ended up, doing really big criminal trials, murders, handled wiretaps, racketeering, things like that. I was I led the legal redress committee for the NAACP in Central Jersey, Middlesex County. So did a lot of civil rights work and owned my own firm, had some lawyers working for me. But every minute, again, I wasn't in trial. I was drinking. So I knew it from that angle. I knew it from a kid who, directly impacted, where Jason impacted because my father was in and out of the joint, and then representing folks. But then in 2011, June of 2011, I was driving drunk, leaving a bar association event of all things, and I hit somebody driving drunk, and I left. I was on a bender. I left, lied my way out of it. 3 days later, cleared off the bender. Had my lawyers start to turn me in. On the fourth day, started turning me in. And, I'll tell you one thing, because you're obviously, a person of faith. I wasn't a person of faith before this experience. I was someone who blamed God when things didn't go my way. And when things did, when I won a trial, it was obviously all me. God had nothing to do with that, right? All my success was me, and all my faults were God's. Right? Which is sadly all too common refrain. But being given the chance to not have killed somebody when the person I hit should have died, right? They should not have lived. They should not have lived. And I know that they shouldn't have lived because I've handled cases like that. And I've seen all the medicals, and I've seen what kills people and what doesn't. And I tell people that if you were to look at the medicals of the person I hurt and realize they shouldn't have lived, and then they lived, they're not in a wheelchair, they went on to recover, a very long road to recovery, of course, but they went on to college. My understanding, they have a master's degree, full career, all these things. If that can't make you believe that there's a higher power, I don't know that anything in this world can.
That's right.
Because that is literally as if an angel protected this person from me, because I was of no help to the situation. It's one of the worst parts of my life. But you know what? Even if it is the worst part of my life, I know it was much worse. It was 10 times the worst part of their life was running into me, the alcoholic. So with that, a lot of lawyers would have sort of milked the system, milked the process for the best plea deal. I told my lawyers, go turn me in, and then, we're pleading guilty, and that's it. And I need to get into recovery. I need to get clean. My lawyers, of course, did what I would have done, which was sent me a CYA letter saying, hey, we want to file motions. We want to do all these things. What are you doing? And I said, I want to resolve it. I have to do something different here. And that means I have to accept all the consequences as they come. So I pled guilty. I was ready to plead guilty at the first appearance, actually, but the state delayed it. So I guess it was the second appearance I pled guilty. And then from there, I was sentenced to 6 years in state prison between the date of arrest or the day I turned myself in, the date I went to prison. I had to tie up my law firm. In fact, my last case, I was out on $150,000 bail, and I argued and won a case before the New Jersey Supreme Court while I was out on bail. Well, it wasn't my client's fault that I was a screw up, right? So I carried that all the way. It was a tough case to do, I'll tell you that. Then I got sentenced to 6 years in New Jersey State Prison. Now, at this point, I don't know anybody politically or anything like that. Right. So I assume I'm doing all 6, to be honest. That's what I figured was going to happen. And by the grace of God, I go up for parole. I have no friends in parole. I have no friends in politics. Right. And the parole board agrees to let me out. Except I have nowhere to go. My home was foreclosed upon. I had to move. I was able to move in with a law school roommate in Hoboken, New Jersey, which, if anybody knows New Jersey, Hoboken is not where a drunk normally goes to get sober. It's like Austin, Texas, comprised into a 1 mile town, very big party town. But God put me there, and I think where there's a lot of partying, there's a lot of good recovery. That experience in prison changed the way I viewed the world, because I assumed I knew. First of all, most criminal defense lawyers would tell you they know everything about prison when they've never been, right? They'll all tell you, right? Oh yeah, take 5 years. Don't worry about it, right? They don't have a clue, and they shouldn't have a clue, most of them. For me, I thought that plus the fact because my father was in and out of prison, I had visited many prisons, etc. I assumed that I definitely knew everything, right? So I knew if the average criminal defense lawyer thinks they know everything, imagine what I thought I knew. But then, of course, you don't know anything till that door closes, till you're standing in the bar and it goes and slams in front of you, right? And then you learn what prison really is. You learn every aspect of it, the good, which is very little, the
Right.
bad, which is significant, the ugly, which is even more significant than the bad.
Right.
And I say this all the time. I met some of the best people in prison, both inmates and guards,
Mm-hmm.
and I met some of the worst people in prison,
Mm-hmm.
both inmates and guards, right?
Right. Right.
I mean,
Right.
but the thing that stuck with me more than anything else, because I don't really complain about my prison experience. I put myself there, um, and look, prison is not supposed to be the Hilton. It could have been nicer than it was. I'll give it that.
Right.
But the one thing that I never forget is that no one asked me for money, but nearly everybody asked me for a job. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember sitting there, I was like, I'm wearing orange just like you. Why in my head, like, why the hell would you ask me for a job?
Right.
Right? I'm an
Right.
inmate, I'm going through bankruptcy, but I realized that in many ways, I was the closest thing they ever saw to the above ground market. I was the best connection they ever had to the regular workforce.
Right.
And so I'm listening to this, right? And it struck me very profoundly because look, when you lock with someone, and everybody who's been to prison or jail for any significant, especially prison, because a longer stretch, you get to know people, right? You lock with a person, they tell you about their family, right? They tell you about things going on. They tell you about what their hopes and dreams were that they never think they're going to be able to achieve again because now they have that scarlet F for felon on their record forever.
Right.
You learn that people want to take care of their kids. They want to do all those things. Nobody wants to abandon their children. They just don't see another way.
Right.
And and because no one asked me for money, but nearly everybody asked me for a job. And at the same time, I'm watching the criminalization of poverty that was going on in New Jersey at the time. So at this time, these were the days in New Jersey where people would go out, could be arrested for unpaid fines and fees. So poor people, normally black poor people, would
Mm-hmm.
leave on supervision and then be unable to pay some measly, $50 fine, $100 fine, and be returned to prison because now they got arrested while under supervision, right? So, and of course that screwed up everything they were trying to do. So I get out, I'm back, I'm in Hoboken. I had a job, thankfully. It wasn't in criminal justice reform, I was working at a corporation, but I only got the job because I had a connection, right? And I had a friend. But I knew that I wanted to help what I saw. I just didn't know how. I had no law license anymore.
Right.
So, and obviously I was on parole and bankrupt and living on a law school roommate's house. So I have a chance meeting with the former governor of New Jersey, Jim McGreevey. And at the time, McGreevey was doing county jail ministry and addiction treatment work at a place called Integrity House in the Hudson County Jail. And I was blessed to have a chance meeting with McGreevey, and he had a vision to build reentry programs around New Jersey. I actually was not interested in building a reentry program. Figure that out. I was interested in getting my lawyer buddies together to stop the criminalization of poverty, to assign people with criminal records a lawyer. So that way the lawyer could go to court for them, clear up the warrant, clear up the fine, so they could obviously operate in the free world, not run anymore, and actually get a job.
Mm-hmm.
So Governor McGreevey and I put those two things together, and the New Jersey Reentry Corporation was formed. This is back in 2014. So we did that. We went and saw Chris Christie, who was our governor at the time, who was a big believer in second chances and big believer in, especially in addiction treatment. And the state of New Jersey put up seed money. We put every former governor on the board of directors. And we built, before I left, in the 3 years I was there, we built 8 sites, onboarded about 60 employees and served many thousands of people. But, going back to that driver's license program I told you about,
Mm-hmm.
I connected 70 pro bono lawyers to a single cloud-based case management system. Think of it like the poor man's Uber for lawyers. Cleared up hundreds of driver's licenses, got rid of thousands of warrants, hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines mitigated. And people got real job. You saw people who were afraid to go outside for a warrant now getting into the unions and the building trades. So that was my first foray, so to speak, into everyday criminal justice reform. And it was sort of an odd thing for me because here I am, this I have a felony like everybody else, right? I was on parole for actually the whole story I told you is on parole for almost all of it. So I didn't get off parole till 16. And and here I am, this disbarred lawyer teaching continuing legal education credits to other lawyers and judges, right, to do this kind of work. So very, very blessed in that way. And again, President Obama toured the program, our partner program, Integrity House, and we were with him in 15. Then at the end of 17, I get a call to ask if I'd come to DC and work on national policy, not reentry programs anymore. I wasn't sure I was going to do it. I had a really good gig in New Jersey. Governor McGreevey is very, very good to me. A very, very good friend. And I prayed on it. And then I came to DC and I realized that if I could help more people, then I kind of had an obligation to do that. Right. And I think that's the thing. If when your number gets called, you have to be ready to jump in the game. Right. And I think that my number was called to be of service. But to do that service, I would have to relive the worst moments of my life almost every day. But to me, that's a small price to pay because, again, the person I heard had a much worse time.
Right. And look, I want to kind of like, and here we're talking about, second chances in the workplace and far as, being able people to get a jobs. But I want to kind of shift this a little bit. Yeah. You stated that you was guilty. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You stated you were guilty. So you was in there for something that you actually did, right?
100%.
Okay. So there's other people who are in there and they're guilty, but there's still some laws that's in place, right? So even though a person is guilty, okay, let's talk about this pretrial injustices a little bit. Okay. I know a person who's guilty. One thing for me and what I was fighting was my Sixth Amendment right, to effective assistance of counsel. Even though I was guilty, I'm still determined. I'm still supposed to be given some justice in certain areas because of my constitutional rights. Correct? Am I understanding what you're saying? Okay. So let's kind of, with this, something that's going wrong in a person's case that's guilty, can that help them get out? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But they're guilty. But because their laws or their constitutional rights.
So it depends. So it depends, right? So a couple things. So first and foremost, the way the criminal justice system is set up in almost every state and federally is that if you exercise your constitutional rights, you run the risk of doing a lot worse than if you waive all your constitutional rights and plead guilty, right? Okay. So I'll give you an example, right? Oftentimes in the federal system, right, if you start filing motions, your plea offer goes up. Right. The offer from the government goes up and up and up. Right. Or they just pull the whole offer. Right. Oftentimes when you sign a plea agreement in the federal system, you waive rights to appeal. You waive things that might have happened to you that were unconstitutional or illegal, but you waive them as part of the deal. Mm-hmm. In the state system, very common in the state system where your plea offer will be X. If you file, and let's say you have a really good search and seizure issue, say completely illegal search. Mm-hmm. If you were to file that motion and win, case goes away. But if you file that motion and lose, that offer that was probation is now 3 years.
Right.
Right. Or worse. So I just want to start there. Right. That's the first part of where it becomes. And the term lawyers use a lot is called the trial tax or the trial penalty. Right. That if you go and exercise your constitutional rights and you go to trial and you lose, it's open season. In fact, that's what happened to, our mutual dear friend, Alice Marie Johnson. Right. Mm-hmm. Alice Marie Johnson, very public about her case. Right. And her deal was like 39 months or 30 something months. Mm-hmm. And she went to trial and got mandatory life.
Right.
Right. So, and then what happened was, so now getting to your point, so then you get up, say whether you plead guilty or you're found guilty, and now you're trying to appeal. Well, the problem is that the standard of review for appeals are limited. Okay. And that standard of review means that in most situations, you're you're going to be out of luck unless it was something glaring. On ineffective assistance of counsel issues, they vary generally by jurisdiction, but usually you have to show that the lawyer was ineffective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that the ineffective issue would have changed the outcome of the case, which is the other harder part to prove, right? So, so what that does is that it creates a situation where, you have to be really careful about, if you have a good case, right, to exercise your rights. Okay. So, and then, but the beauty of this, of the issue you're elevating for your viewers, right? It's an issue. It's like a corner of the criminal justice system that people really don't understand, because at its root is over-criminalization and sentencing reform. So over-criminalization, right, is the old saying, is the old Joseph Stalin, right? Find me the man and I'll find you the crime, right? And we have, in fact, there's no one actually knows how many federal crimes there are. No one has fully counted them. Well, that's a fact. And like Republicans have tried to do this forever, right? Said, well, someone give me a count of what they are. We don't even know. Okay. So that's the first part. But then the second part is the sentencing reform. So when you look at other countries, look at Norway, they talk about the Norwegian model. I don't think you can get more than 21 years for anything in Norway, for anything at all. And for us, you get 21 years for drugs, right?
Right.
Or more. So I think that the question of sentencing reform comes right to what we're talking about here, because if the sentencing laws were adjusted, say, to the severity of the crime, more people would probably exercise their constitutional rights. But if you know that if you exercise your constitutional rights, if you have a good case and you want to do that, but the price of failure is 30 years or 40 years or or forever, you're certainly not going to do that. So all of these issues, and it's really, I'm really excited the way you're elevating these issues, Militia, to show how one part of the criminal justice system, that pretrial work, affects everything else downstream.
And because I know, and I think it's easier. And like I tell people too, you don't know if you've never been in that situation. Okay, what a person will do. And I do know that sometimes when we're trying to fight different things, you're taking a chance whether I'm getting more time or whatever the case is. But when you're dealing with a person who may have a life sentence, they feel like either way, I'm going to try it anyway because I already have this life sentence. Okay. But what I will say is that second chances and criminal justice reform and advocate for a person who's incarcerated is even for people who could be guilty in a certain thing, because I'm a believer that people can change.
Me too. And it's mostly for people who are guilty, right? It's mostly, right? That's not the exception. It's the rule. It's for all of us. Look, if we don't permit people people who have committed crimes, right, and who make mistakes, if we don't permit them to fully re-enter society, fully, capital F, fully re-enter society, what do we think is going to happen? Right? If we don't permit people to become members of society again without all of these various restrictions, right? Then what do we think is going to happen? And that is one of the most fundamental points, I think, that is missed, that you're doing such a great job of elevating around the country for the whole movement, Militia, is the fact that, right, it should matter less what you did than what you are doing.
Amen.
Now, again, this isn't for everybody, right? If somebody is still participating in crime, right, or is hiding it, so be it, right? But for the overwhelming majority, look, there aren't too many people I know who, when they were getting out, were like, man, I cannot wait to get back here. I cannot wait to get back to eating prison food and showering next to you, John, right? Very few people, in fact, nobody ever said that.
Yeah, right? Definitely. Right?
So the idea here is that we don't permit people generally to fully re-enter society. We simply don't. And that is something that, we see changes, like, for example, expungement laws are a really good and big first step, right? Because at least it takes some of that off the record, right? Of course, but with Google, Like, doesn't matter. They can expunge my record. All I have to do is Google me and everyone's going to know what happened, right? Like there's
Right,
no, the digital footprint is too large,
right,
which
right.
is a separate issue. But I
Mhm.
think you're right. If someone is not given a path, I'll put it this way. People talk about hope a lot, right?
Mhm.
And right, hope can have certain effects, but hopelessness has immediate effects,
Right.
right? Right. If someone's hopeful, they may or may not do something because they may just be hoping. If someone is hopeless because they have no opportunity
Mhm.
and they're and their life before was drugs, crime, whatever it is, there's a really good chance they're going to do that. And I always tell law enforcement around the country that an investment in second chances is an investment in public safety,
Mhm.
because like if people don't get well, there's just going to be more victims.
That's
Like
right.
for me, if I don't get well, there very well could have been more drunk driving victims, right?
Right, right.
So, right, if people that commit other crimes don't get well, whatever well looks like, right? Well
Mhm.
might mean in my case it was get over alcoholism, right? In
Mhm.
other people's case, it's they need a house. In other people's case, mental health treatment. In other people's case, it's a job. Whatever it is, that is one of the best public safety tools in the country. And the good news is we're starting to see people realize that in drips and drabs around the country, but
Mhm.
there's still more work to do.
Amen. All right. Let me see. Are you aware that Matthew 5:25 to 26 is a principle that you submitted to? People are offered extra nominal amount of time and take a chance to go to trial and end up with far more time. Okay. So I'm trying to understand what they're saying here. It says people are offered nominal amount of time and take a chance going to trial, then end up with far more time. Can you kind of elaborate on
Sure.
that a little bit?
Well, what Kelly's talking about is the trial tax right there, right? So that is the trial penalty, right? The trial tax. And the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers put out a really good study on this. I think it's
Mhm.
called the trial penalty. Might even be called the trial penalty, right? And
Mhm.
it looked at jurisdictions. And that is the truth, is that it becomes this perverse system is what is it worth to either prove my innocence or what is it not mine, meaning the person I was
Right.
guilty, but
Right.
a person in that situation, what does it cost to prove their innocence, or what does it cost to prove what they really did, right?
Mm.
And to
Okay.
have an appropriate value, meaning punishment value, put to that. And I think that is, I mean, that's why prosecutors and district attorneys um, it's so important to know who your prosecutors and district attorneys are if you have a place where they're elected, right? Because
Mhm.
because they hold immense amounts of power, right? And most exercise of in the best interest of the community to keep the place safe. But at the end of the day, right, they can make your life miserable with the snap of a finger because of the amount of power they wield, including exactly what Kelly's talking about. They could
Okay.
offer you probation to waive all your rights, or and you go to trial and then you get smoked.
Right. And a lot of times people try, and I've known just based off being in my incarceration that a lot of people who go to trial because they're trying to prove they're innocent wind up getting, like, of course, with Miss Alice. It was just because I know that this wasn't right. So I'm gonna take a chance in this and get way more time than they should have did, because a lot of times some people don't even want to take a chance and get in a record. And then here we go. Let's see what Kelly has to say again. People don't know this principle exists. Having proper counsel to make people aware of this will prevent people from going to trial, especially people who know they are guilty.
She's right, and look, when I practiced law, Kelly, I would have very long conversations with my clients, right? And say, look, if you're correct, we walk out of this room together. If you're wrong, or or you're right and the jury doesn't think you're right, I will go home and you will never come home. And I think that spelling that out is something lawyers really should spend more time doing. And I think that unfortunately, it sometimes lawyers don't realize the education and comprehension gap, right? Because the whole principle, you have to meet people where they are, right?
Mhm.
Well, where we are, I mean, I happen to grow up in this wild environment, but a lot of lawyers grow up on the golf course, right? So like,
Mhm.
so they're used to speaking to people in a certain way. Or the person might have reading issues, comprehension issues, a lot of different things. So I would literally spell it out with numbers right on there, and I would actually put the year I would literally put the year, judges used to look at me and say, why are you putting all this on like when we do pre-trial conferences, when you have to decide if you're going to go to trial or even a plea agreement, right? When they're waiving their right to trial. Now I'd say under this plea agreement, you were eligible for release in 2016. If we go to trial and lose, you on any count, you will get out in 2026 at the earliest or 2030, right? Because you have to recognize some people they're not calculating that in their head, but you see the year 2020, whatever, or 2040, whatever on a piece of paper, that can help you think about it. And candidly, all you want is for people to make intelligent decisions, right? The decision's always the client's, right? But you want them to make intelligent decisions, and you want to make sure that they don't walk themselves into a buzzsaw that they're going to pay for forever.
Mm-hmm. And that's where going back to that effective assistant of counsel come in at, right? Is that because I think a lot, especially public defenders, and this is just in my case or that I'm aware, they're ready to, that the caseload is so overloaded. They got so many people, who maybe can't afford an attorney or whatever the case. So let me just go ahead and just deal with this quickly and get through with it. But then here we go. We got this large amount of time that's on our hand, and it's hard to get out, especially when you got that plea deal.
So, public defenders get a really bad rap, and I'm going to say, look, I was a private lawyer. I did pool work for, from time to time when the PD's office had a conflict, they would ask if I would take a case. I could say yes or no, but I'd still do it as a private lawyer. Some of the best trial lawyers I've ever met are public defenders, current ones. Some of the best tacticians are meaning the trial tacticians are public defenders. But you point out a constitutional crisis in this country, the Sixth Amendment, as you brought out about a half hour ago. So the Sixth Amendment is your right to counsel, right? An effective assistance of counsel. Well, in some places in this country, the public defender's office is not funded, right? There are places, and I'm not talking about places, in very conservative areas. You find places in blue and purple states where that's the case.
Right.
In many places, they're underfunded, right? And then what happens is, as a byproduct of no funding or as a byproduct of underfunding, you get exactly what you're talking about, Militia, which are public defenders with too many cases who are forced to do too many cases, right? And I use forced because, again, nobody who's a public defender says, man, first of all, nobody goes into the public defender's office unless they actually want to help people, right? That's not an area that everyone, when you're sitting in law school, everyone's saying, oh, wow, I can't wait to cash out and become a public defender, right? These are people who want to help the people. Mm-hmm. But the funding issue, the deck is completely stacked. And I think that's the problem. So you see places like Los Angeles County has, tremendously well-funded public defender's office, for example. New Jersey has a very good public defender's office. But sometimes they're funded by counties instead of state systems or underfunded. And then you get a situation exactly like that. Because I would tell people all the time, you could bring Johnny Cochran back from the dead. And if you give him that many cases, he is not going to be able to represent you as well as you would think he could. Right? Johnny Cochran had like 4 cases a year.
That's right. And we got a few more minutes, but I want to bring up what criminal justice reform and how people can get more involved in it. How can they help? They don't understand really what it is. They know I want to be able to help people who's in prison, who's coming out of prison. Give them some ways of what they can do and how they can help.
Sure. So I think the first thing, listening to people like you, Militia, who have been there, right, who are amplifying this around the country, I think is tremendous because it's a great place to get educated without any of the rhetoric, right? Like any of the tough on crime, right? Like you're giving the real story, right, straight to the viewers. And I think that's news outlets, podcast outlets like that are number one. So you can be educated on the issue. The second thing I would do is get involved politically. Right? Get involved with your elected leaders, your Congress people, your county leaders, right? Your city leaders, right? To find out what they're doing to help people get jobs who have criminal records. And even if you're in an area where your politicians may not be interested in that kind of thing as a premise, I think you should say to them, if we know that employment is one of the greatest protective factors against reoffense, what are we doing to make sure that we're giving those protective factors in our community, because I don't want any more victims, just like you don't want any more victims. And then what happens is that's a conversation that tough on crime folks agree with. They say, you're right, I don't want any more victims either. So what do we got to do to balance public safety and do this? So get involved politically, I think, is the very first thing you should do.
Okay.
And I always encourage people, because, you know, I never got into anything into politics until I was a guy with a criminal record, actually. Right. And now I make a joke, I can't get away from politicians, but that's a joke. I think that staying politically active, in the sense being able to educate and be a part of the solution, that's the only way to go. And then the other end, I think it would be for our business leaders who might be listening, really try to understand, if you're not hiring people with criminal records now, are you in an industry that can, right? Certain regulated professions don't permit that. And does it make sense? Are you having a labor issue? Are you having a turnover issue? And if you're going to give people with records a second chance, how do you do it? And then there's a number. You could reach out to militia, you could reach out to me, you could reach out to a lot of people to help you develop candidates to do that. And the interesting thing is, you're going to make money, right? Because you're going to have better candidates, you're going to have less turnover, and you're going to have a great downstream effect. You know, one of the most beautiful things about the work we all do in criminal justice reform, are there are people we'll never meet whose lives and the trajectory of their lives and the trajectories of their families will be forever altered by the work we do every day. We'll never meet them. Right. Sure. But that's the great honor and privilege of being able to do this kind of work.
Great. One more question from Kelly. She got another one for you. All right. If so many that have mandatory life sentences from not being away from the principles are left feeling hopeless, they spend their lives filing motions to try to get back in court for some sort of hope.
That's accurate. That's accurate. And I think that's real. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you were doing life, why wouldn't you try to find a way out of there, right? And I think that one other piece, but to Kelly's point, Kelly's tremendous comments that Kelly's given us throughout this session really show the other thing people forget in this country is that employment's a great protective factor, but one of the best predictors of recidivism, age, right? So the person that got 50 years at 18, if you gave them a resentencing and they get out at 38 instead of 68, you're dealing with a completely different individual.
That's right.
Completely different individual. Even if you didn't have the trauma and drama, the T and the D, the trauma and the drama of prison, I'm not the same. At 38, I was not the same person I was at 18. I'm not the same person. I'm 46 now. I'm not the same person I was at 40. Right. So I think that's the other thing. And that's really the sad commentary on these life sentences, is that at some point these people have changed, but they're never going to get out.
Right. Well, this has been great and very informative. And I know that not only I, but others are just, thank you so much for just giving us some information on this. Now, I want to just kind of close with this. And we talked about, far as giving the people the jobs, we're talking about, far as some of the different issues, far as sentences. And we talked about, and thank you for saying that about the public defenders getting a bad rap, because they do. And I'm actually one of them, because sometimes you feel like if you don't pay somebody something, they're not going to do their best at it. So thank you for clearing up that, for us, because a lot of people feel that, I need to get an attorney, or I need to get this, or whatever the case that's paid. And I can talk about my case. I had a paid lawyer that went, but that's
right. Because a lot of paid lawyers will take your big retainer and then cop you out, so you don't have to do any more of the work, right?
Right.
So again, just like in the prison system, some people are never gonna, some people are gonna be the way they are no matter what. Some people are gonna want to do well. Lawyers, same, public defender, everybody. That's people. Right. It doesn't matter what profession you're in. But no, the public defenders get a tremendously bad rap. And again, I think that it's very unjustified. But again, the deck is stacked against the public defenders purely because of the caseload. And that's not their fault. They don't have a choice.
Right. Right. And two, we need to get more involved. We do, like I say, and it was a good point that you said, a person who did a ample amount of time, they're not that same person
Nope.
that went in there. For me, because I've been in and out, I had to get it to get it. So you had to give me a 12-year sentence. And guess what? I'm not that same person that started, at 19 or at 20. So sometimes that time, it helps, even though they give some lengthy football numbers now. But the more time somebody's spending there, most likely when they get out of here, they're not going to be that same person. So thank you for that. And I want y'all to get involved. Don't just take April as Second Chance Month. Let it be about every day. Let
That's
it be
right.
about every day. Whether you got a family member incarcerated or you don't even know somebody, I'm quite sure somebody in everybody's church, somebody's incarcerated somewhere. Somebody's family member is incarcerated. And we want to take action for change. We want this world and this country to be a better place, even with the violence that's going on here. It's a reason for things that's happened. And if we just start and get back together and do the things that we should be doing as believers, this we can make this country great, as our former president, have stated. So, John, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all you do for the people of this country.
Thank you so much. And remember, y'all, don't forget, it's about Jesus, and Jesus is the key to reentry. He's going to keep us out. Okay. We're going to keep our faith. We're going to keep our trust in him. And, I just want to just thank you. And hold on, one last one. Is there a foundation or someone you can recommend that can help an inmate file a motion? Maybe you can get with me later. I signed pretty late with this. Okay. So, okay, I will give them your name, but she wanted to know, is there a foundation or somebody that maybe can help?
That's very state specific, but can I put my, let me put I'll put my email in here. And then if I have a friend if I have a connection in the state, I'll do that. So if you could just put that on whatever you need to put, although I might be in a private chat, my email.
Okay, yeah, but I'll make sure I know who this person is, so I'll make sure she get it.
Yeah, if you could give it to her, I'd appreciate that. And then if I know somebody in the state, I'll make the connection. If I don't, I'll see if I can guide them. And if I can't, I'm sorry.
That's fine. All right. Let me stick you right here so anybody right here can see it. So I'm gonna put it there.
Please.
Yeah. So here's his information. Here's his email address. If you want to give him send him an email, ask him any questions outside of this. And thank you so much, John. God bless
you. Thanks for having me.
And everything that you do. And great. All right. Remember, we got another episode tonight at 6:00. She's one of our field directors for Prison Fellowship. So she'll be on talking about how she got started with Prison Fellowship and the different things that they're doing. So remember, Jesus is the key to reentry. And I would see y'all tonight.